So, have you ever jumped? This is a horrible intro.
Oh my God.
This book that you wrote is, I've never been more excited for a book.
Oh yeah?
I've not even the book I wrote.
Not even Harry Potter?
And
those are coming out?
Never mind. I dressed up for that actually. So
yeah, that's true.
I dressed up to go to the premiere.
Yeah, you put the fake scar on your head.
Oh yeah, the lightning bolt.
Yeah.
And everything.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So I take it back. Other than that, is probably, other than Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, I would say that this is probably like the most excited I've been.
All right.
And it's because I've been aware of these ideas that you share in the book.
We've had these conversations, yeah.
You've taught me these concepts for a long time, and I know that you started it so long ago and put it on the shelf and then came back to it and said, you know what, I'm actually going to refine it. And
yeah, it was an interesting process because I started working on this book probably a decade ago. And
was it, I think it was even longer than that.
It may have been maybe 12, 13 years ago or so. And started putting together the concept about how you advance a business. So it was really designed initially for business owners, particularly financial advisors, on how you take it to the next level, right? And there were a lot of techniques and worksheets and things like that.
Yeah.
And I set it aside. It just didn't feel right. You ever start a project and you're like, something isn't right here.
You set it aside after having like gotten pretty far along.
Oh, it was, yeah.
You had a full manuscript, like a bound copy of it.
Yeah. I had a spiral bound copy that I'd worked on. And it just didn't feel right. So I set it aside. And what I came up with now is so much better. I'm so glad I set it aside because now it's a broader audience for everybody, not just business owners.
It's definitely not financial advice.
No, it's not for financial advice. It's for anybody that have you ever felt stuck?
Mm-hmm.
All right, then it's for you. All right, so it's that specific on how to deal with feeling stuck. Because what I realized was that we never are permanently and tractably stuck anywhere.
Even in a positive place.
No, even in a positive place, is that you are constantly moving through a series of plateaus, that there are phases in this plateau, and where your next plateau is depends on your ability to manipulate the levers of change and to control certain mindsets. And that's how you move from one phase to the next.
So I'm sure that the difference in the book's content now and why you feel like it's so much better, and well, I know it's better too than the original manuscript you wrote, but why you feel so much more confident about it is because you went through a lot of life changes between the time you started and the time that you've now published it. What was the biggest change in your life that you think allowed you to refine the concept so much broader than only business focus?
Yeah, so there was a book called Transitions by Bruce Feiler. He talks about the fact that our life is a series of these transitions, that there are transition things that happen to all of us, and that growth, there's another concept called punctuated equilibrium, that the idea was that evolution over time used to be thought of as happening gradually, just over time, species change from one to the other. And as it turns out, that's not how it happens. There are periods of stasis where species stay the same. And then there is an event that acts upon them. There will be a drought or a meteor or new invasive species, things that causes adaptation. And it happens in our own life too. And that we'll go through life kind of rocking along and things will start to happen.
Yeah.
And if you can see them happening, you can affect the change in the way that you want. If you miss them, you're going to end up hitting the ground. You're going to hit hard and you're going to have to make a change. It may not be the change you want, but change will come nevertheless.
Yeah. Okay.
So when I really started thinking about this and kind of resurrected the whole book, is I went through and sold my business a few years ago and took off for about 3 months from the business. So I was set to come back as CEO of the business, but not an owner of the business, and hiked on the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a trail that goes north-south from Mexico to Canada. It's about 2,600 miles. I did about 1,000 miles of it, and that was plenty for me. And so there was one day I was hiking, and that was in itself a plateau jump, just kind of moving from being a business owner to not.
To being a hiker.
To being a hiker, right. And so there was one day, about a weekend, and you actually hiked with me for the first 109, 110 miles or so. And
110, let's go. Let's say that. That sounds better.
It does.
Yeah.
And so that actually was a big deal for me when you left.
I was really sad.
Oh, I started to, I don't think I've ever told you this. I was in, I can't remember, I think it was Warner Springs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where you left.
That's like the first, like,
first town you get
real
to.
town. And by town, it just means they had a post office.
It's like barely a town.
It wasn't like, you know.
Yeah, the people who live there are in the tens, I think. Right.
Yeah.
And so there was another hiker that I was sitting with, and
this is after I left?
Yeah, you were gone. So this was the next day. And I was talking to this other hiker, which I actually, funny enough, ended up seeing in Oregon. So this Warner Springs is
Southern California.
100 miles from the Mexican border.
Yeah, very much Southern California.
Ended up seeing her again in Oregon.
Wow.
Right, cross paths with her there. So I'm telling her that, because she's asking the question, who are you hiking with? Where are you going? Yes, normal things. And I start telling her that I'd been hiking with you and that you had just left. And I started tearing up. I started getting like super emotional. And it was a big thing, because now I realize I'm on this journey by myself.
Yeah.
Whatever this journey has to teach me, I've got to learn. Yeah. And I'm up, and it's up to me. And so a few days later, I'm hiking up Mount San Jacinto. And it was really snowy because I was starting early in the year.
This is still in California?
Still in California, yeah. So I'm hiking Mount San Jacinto. And so I take this odd route, because I had learned that there had been some accidents because of the snow and the ice, and it was pretty dangerous. So I was going sort of an alternate path. Somebody, like the day before, had fallen down the mountain, really, really gotten hurt. And so I'm going up through the snow, and there are these footprints, and so I'm just following the footprints. And because that's easier, right, than making your own path, right? Yeah. So I'm following somebody else's path.
You don't have to crunch through the snow. You can just step on the already hard compacted snow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm going along and just kind of not really paying attention. I'm just kind of in this zone where I'm just kind of moving along, not really wondering where I'm going, where I am, or what I'm doing. And I stop, and I decide I'm going to check progress. I'm going to check my map. I check my map, and I'm nowhere near where I needed to be.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm not even close to the trail. And so I start off in a different direction, check my map again, and now it's worse. And so, and not the best orienteer, I guess. And what I realized was that I got lost. I got on this spot because I didn't know where I was. I hadn't checked where I was going, and I was following somebody that I didn't even know where they were going.
they might
right. I didn't even know who it was. They might have been lost.
Yeah.
And so I stopped, and I wrote down those three things. I said, know where you are, know where you're going, know who you're following. And so I'm like, all right, well, this journey is going to start teaching me something. And so I thought, all right, well, I will go. I looked at where I needed to be, and I thought, I'll take a shortcut. So I head down this hill to this creek, and I'm going to cross the creek, right? This tree had fallen. And so I'm making my way across this tree. I'm kind of, walking across this tree, across this creek. And I realized that all of a sudden the tree shifts, or I shift. I don't know what, but something happened, and I almost fell into the creek. I don't think I ever told you that. And I looked down, and this would have ended me if I'd fallen. And I would have
Really?
been there, certainly not able to get out. But I would have had broken things,
Mhm.
right? And I'm like, oh, nobody ever would have found me because I'm not on the trail.
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near the trail, not where anybody would be.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is dumb. I backtrack through these steps, these footprints, and that was easy. So I start going backwards against the trail where I'd come, and I found the sign that I had missed, and the sign that pointed the right way. And the reason I missed it is that the sign was buried in the snow. So only about 3 or 4 inches of the sign, which was a 5-foot tall sign, was poking up through the snow. So it was easy to miss. It's not where you look for signs. And so I stopped and I wrote down another note, and I wrote down, look for hidden signs, watch for the signs. And so I start heading the right direction. And from there, I thought I can learn a lot from just paying attention to things, that what life is teaching me. And I can apply it to this concept, which I knew, which was that we move through phases. We don't actually get stuck anywhere for long. It feels that way, but that we move through these phases, and these phases are important to recognize where you are, so that to get to where you want to be, you have to be purposeful, and you have to activate certain levers of change, I called them, to do that. So that may have been a longer answer than you wanted, but
that was a better answer than what I thought I was going to get. So,
Right.
that when people maybe who haven't experienced a trail like the Pacific Crest Trail, or haven't done real, hiking out in the wilderness like that, it's a scary place, because you're right. If you think like a sprained ankle is no big deal, I've sprained my ankle before. Well,
you do it out there
you could
by yourself.
A sprained ankle could be your death out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, especially if you're not on the trail, nobody's going to see you.
Yeah, you're in a place where nobody is, and especially if you think 5 feet of snow in late March in Southern California. That year, 2019, was particularly heavy snowfall in the entire American West.
Yeah, it was like 165% of normal, which made the stream crossings more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And even later, as all the snow melted, the streams got bigger.
Yeah.
And it made the stream crossings aggressive.
Yeah, I climbed a mountain in Colorado that year on Memorial Day entirely in the snow.
Wow.
Like that's how bad the snowfall was, or how great it was. I went skiing on June 1st that year.
Oh,
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Full skiing in Arapahoe Basin.
Mhm.
So that was a like really, really heavy snowfall year, which makes it even more dangerous.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the life changes that you experienced in this, the idea is, and one of the main takeaways from plateau jumping is that plateaus mostly are referred to as negative places by most people. Like we say, oh, I'm trying to get better in my business, but we've just hit a plateau.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get better at running, but my times aren't improving. I've hit a plateau. And we refer to them negatively. And you had always taught me that the opposite's true.
The opposite is true. So a plateau is not only not negative, it's a necessary phase in our development, in our growth. It's a necessary journey in our growth. It teaches us something. It's our learning. It's how we learn something. If you pay attention. Now, if you don't, then it's a place where you get stuck.
Yeah.
Temporarily. But if you pay attention to what you can learn from there, you realize that it is a necessary place in our journey.
What makes them learning opportunities instead of frustrating, slow growth moments?
Okay, so think about the plateau rather than how we normally are taught to think about a plateau, which is sort of a bowl. In other words, you fall into this plateau and you can't get out, or you're stuck, or a plateau is this flattening out of progress, right?
Yeah. And most people say you just got to grind more, you got to work harder.
You got to work harder.
Yeah.
And not necessarily.
Or time, just time, you'll get out of it.
Well, that's true.
If you,
That's
but not
true.
for the reason that we
Right.
think.
Yeah. If you wait, you will be off the plateau. It won't be where you want to be.
Yeah.
You will go to a place you don't want to be, but you'll be off of that plateau.
Because industry will change, life will change, things will move past you.
Right. So think about this. When we look at a plateau, think about it in 3 phases. There's the initial phase where you've gotten to a higher place, right? So you've done some mountain climbing, right?
Yes.
So have you ever gotten up to climb the mountain and you get to the summit only to realize that was a false summit?
Of course.
You just couldn't see the next one. You couldn't
see
see the
it,
real summit until you got there. Then you realize there's more to go. So when you get to a plateau, you have arrived at some place that was initially a false summit. We're going to call this the cliffside, right? So this is the first part of your plateau. The advantage there is now you see more opportunity. Now you see more growth opportunities. You see the potential. There's this sense of reward, relief, excitement, achievement. You've done some things, but the risk now is you revert.
Yeah.
You revert back to the way you used to do. Think about people who lose a lot of weight because they've done some stuff. They celebrate this weight loss. And then what happens 9 months, 12 months later? They gain a lot back because they reverted back. We see that in addictions. We see that in weight loss. We see it even in business advancement. So from there, if you keep growing and developing, you get to what we'll call the second phase. We'll call it the campground. All right, so the campground is a place where now it's comfortable. You're getting some recognition. Your natural abilities are shining through. You're getting some rewards. Things are going well. It's easy. You got this. But the thing about the campground is you can't stay there. Yeah. Right? It is a place of relaxation, rejuvenation, relief, but it is also temporary.
Yeah.
So you have to move through it. If you don't move from there to another cliffside, another campground, you will revert. You will move forward, let's say fall forward, into what I'll call the canyon wall, the third phase. So this is a point of distress. This is a point of conflict, competition, compliance, profit losses, things like that. All right, so it's not a good place. So you want to get out of this, right? Obviously, you've hit bottom. Things aren't going well. You want to get better. The best place to have gotten better was when you were higher up, when you were at a place of comfort and profits and recognition and total competence. You got to get back to there first before you can move. So you're just having to get out of this pit. Each of these phases have stress. Right, so there's good stress and bad stress. Yeah. Obviously, if you get to the third phase, you've hit bottom, right? Things aren't going well. You've recognized you need to change. This is distress. That's bad, right?
Yes.
You have normalcy stress, right? Which is just the natural stress, which I'll talk about in a minute. At the first phase, you have eustress, which is energizing, right? It's sort of that stress that happens at mile, let's say 25 of the marathon. Right? You should be exhausted. You should be tired. What happens at the end of the marathon?
Excited.
You sprint in, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Right? They're going.
Yeah.
Right? Why is that? Because your body has this eustress that energizes you. It gives you, think about how you feel when you get that 9th punch on a 10 punch card. Now you get a free sandwich, right? Yeah. You're excited about that.
You see the light at the end of the tunnel.
You see the light at the tunnel. Okay. So turns out we need stress in our life. So there was an example I'll give you. Are you familiar with Biosphere 2?
No.
Out in Arizona. So Biosphere 2 was funded by some guys back in the, I think, early 80s. And the idea was that they would create this self-enclosed structure, like a big glass dome structure. And they would live inside there self-sustained. They would have their own water source. They would grow their own food. They would have their own climate. it would be this self-contained biosphere. Yeah. And so an interesting thing happened. They planted some trees that grew in the Amazon. There were fruit trees or something. And because they had the perfect environment, they grew super fast. I mean, like, as you might expect, they grew really fast. They did really, really well.
Yeah.
Lots of trees, great leaves, great branches. They're like, this is perfect. And then they fell over. And they fell over because they had no wind. They had no animals climbing on them. They didn't have to compete. And what they realized was that the trees, all trees, have inside them what's called a stress wood. So the stress wood actually forms the branches and makes them strong against the stresses that come against them. And so when we look at the stresses that we have at these phases, we actually need these stresses. And that's why I made the comment that these plateaus are a necessary part of our development. So we need these plateaus to be able to advance.
The positive stress builds our resiliency, builds our strength. To make it a more physical example, I was talking with a client. We were just talking about what's going on in her life, how things are going, and she says, "Well, I'm trying to work out, trying to get healthier." She meanwhile in her 50s, struggling to get up and get down onto and up off of the couch in my office in her 50s. And we were talking, and I was like, well, what's worked for me is strength training, this and that. And she goes, oh no, that's not good. Lifting weights, that's not good. That's really bad for your joints. And I was just like,
why listen to you?
Really? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Help me up off this couch, by the way.
Yeah. maybe by putting ourselves under that stress, we're building bone density and muscle strength and the things that are important to keep us upright, just like a tree. And that makes sense. I'd shake the plants in my house. Yeah. House plants. Yeah. Shake them to simulate wind and it makes them stronger.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right.
So we need that stress. And the stress that you've identified is chasing that next plateau.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because we're divinely designed for growth, right? So you're going to grow, you're going to move, you're going to have points of transition that happen in your life, good or bad. And how you navigate them depends on your ability to identify where you are, just like my getting lost story. I've got more of those lost stories than I care to recount, but I guess it happens to me a lot. But your ability to work through these levers of change, work through the mindsets, will help you get to the plateau that you want to be at, rather than the one that you've fall to, for example.
So what I'm hearing you say is getting to being on the plateau is good, not bad. And the reason it's good is because it gives us the opportunity to see the next plateau, which was not visible from the place we were before. It gives us an opportunity to reflect. It gives us an opportunity to take a deep breath and plan for that next push to the next plateau, where we will start all over again and be able to see a higher aim than what was visible to us at the current plateau. And so just like when you're on the hike on that Pacific Crest Trail, every day you're pushing to try to get to that next campground and find the perfect flat, smooth spot with shade and with water and all the things. But you can't sleep there every night, because otherwise you're going to run out of food. You're going to be thirsty. You're going to get cold. Winter's going to come. You're not going to ever get to the end of the trail. You can't stay at that campground forever, even though it's a very comfortable place to be for the time that you're there.
Right.
So how is it that we get to the next plateau? Because what I hear is time. Oh, just, keep doing what you're doing and you'll get there. And you're saying, no, that's not going to happen, because the industry is going to change around you. Your clients are going to change. Your employees are going to change. Everything around you in your business or in your life is going to move. And if you just keep doing what you're doing, you're not going to get there. And then if we push and keep doing the same thing, we may just end up getting stuck in that canyon wall and have to unwind some of our growth, so to speak, in order to back up and see the plateau again more clearly and make a leap. Is that what?
Yeah, and that you can't stay at the campground. You can't stay at the plateau.
Yeah.
Because everybody else is changing around you. The industry is changing around you. And you're better off identifying what is the next plateau that I want. Now, it does not have to be bigger, better, stronger, faster.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, but it has to be something you are striving towards. So, for example, I'll tell you a story. There was a conference I went to years ago, and I was, it was one of these conferences, and there was one after another guys talking about how to grow your business and how to gain more clients and how to gain more revenue, just the normal stuff. And I'm kind of sitting in the back, and I'm kind of sitting in the back on purpose so that I can get out.
I can't leave.
If the content is suboptimal, right? If the content isn't of a certain quality, I'm just going to kind of check out. And that was starting to happen. And so the next guy was coming up, and I'd kind of gathered my notebook and my pen, and I was kind of ready to leave. And kind of scooting on my chair and get ready to leave. And the guy asks a question. And he gets up there and he goes, all right, how many of you are happy with the money you're making? Right. And it kind of an opening line, because what he wants is nobody's going to raise their hand, and he's going to say, well, I'm going to show you how to make more money and blah, blah, blah. All right. And what happened was interesting. What happened was that most of the people in the room raised their hand.
Mm-hmm.
They were happy.
That's not what he was expecting.
It was not what I think anybody was expecting, because he was in a room of highly successful business owners. They're all financial advisors at the top sort of 0.5% of the industry, right? These guys were killing it. And so everybody raises their hand. And then you can kind of hear this murmur, this kind of laughter kind of start from the back and kind of move up to the front. Everybody saw what I was seeing. So I sat back down. I said, I want to see what happens with this. How's this guy going to save this presentation? Because he's obviously built a presentation on it. You can't be happy with what you're doing. I'm going to show you how to do more. But what he said was, and it wasn't, you could tell it wasn't in his slides, wasn't in his script. He stopped and he looked around and he said, well, then why does it take you all year?
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
That's a good save.
It's a good save, right? And it got me thinking that growth doesn't have to be, you're going to make more money than you did last year.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's nice, but it doesn't have to be, right? It could be, I'm happy with the money I'm making. I want to take off and spend more time with my family. I want to take off and do some volunteer work. I started after that. I took 2 months off in the middle of the year.
Yeah.
And what had to happen to do that, and it was a bit of a plateau jump, right? Because that's a change from the way I had normally done things. And now I'm going to take off 2 months in succession to get 8 weeks straight. Well, what had to happen was I had to build systems to make my business do that. I had to get people trained to be able to answer the right questions. I had to have a system, unlike if I was gone for 2 days, I would come back to some emails I have to answer, to some phone messages I would have to answer. If you're gone for 8 weeks, you better not come back to any of that. Yeah. You better not come back to 8 weeks of phone calls you have to get back to or emails you. So you got to figure out in your business, how are bills getting paid? Who's going to answer the calls? Who's going to meet with clients? Who's going to address issues? Who has the authority to make decisions? What projects are they going to work on while things are slightly slower because I'm not bringing in, creating new business? So what was interesting is now I'm taking off more time, right? It was the plateau jump that I wanted. I wanted to spend more time with family, with, doing other things that I wanted. We had our best year ever.
Wow.
It never went even lower than that. It kept getting better because now I had refined my business. Now that was unintentional. That was an unintentional consequence, but it was a plateau jump nonetheless.
Yeah. So a lot of times the growth, we may see unintentional growth outcomes even beyond the growth outcome that we're aiming at. So you're trying to get more time back. Well, you also got more money, right?
Yeah. Well, it's that false summit thing. right? In other words, you don't know what's at that next plateau until you get there. And one of the outcomes was I got what I wanted. I wanted to work less. I wanted to have more time back to myself. One of the consequences was I also had a business that grew that year. That was nice. That was nice.
Yeah. So what are the things that you've got to do in order to make a plateau jump?
So when you look at making a plateau jump, there are 5 what I'll call levers of change, right? So if you want to make a change, you've got to change some of these things if you're going to make a change. If you're going to make a change that is significant, and I'm not talking about you're just going to get slightly healthier, you're going to increase your business 5%, you're going to lose a couple pounds. I'm talking about significant change in your life. You got to change one of these 5 things, or a couple of these 5 things. One is your goals, your systems, your habits, relationships, your beliefs. Right?
Goals, systems, habits, relationships, beliefs.
Right. You can't make any significant change unless you change some of those things.
How many do you have to change?
Well, interestingly enough, you can change a couple of them to have enough significant change.
2.
You don't have to change all of them, but changing one will likely not get you the results you want. In other words, I can't just set new goals, right?
Yeah. And I think that's what most people do. Most people say, okay, the lowest common denominator of uncreative growth brainstorming is we want to make more money, like you were saying.
Right.
That's just even people who've spent zero time thinking about their own growth or their business growth can at least come up with that. Like, I'm not wrong if I say I want to grow and make more money.
I want to sell 20% more stuff.
Yeah, nobody's going to say, why do you want to do that?
Right.
You're not going to get challenged. So for people that say their gut instinct, probably without a lot of thinking, is going to be to say, okay, well, I want to make more money. And so in order to make more money, I need to have a bigger goal.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go, Dan. And you're saying, number one, money or growth of revenue, growth of income is certainly not the only growth avenue. It's probably not the right growth avenue for even most people. And it's not even necessarily the most impactful growth avenue. And I would say it's probably one of the least motivating because it's not tied to something more tangible. But if you want to get there, even if you want to grow your revenue, changing your goals is not going to be enough. You're going to have to change either systems, habits, relationships, or beliefs in addition to that.
In other words, you can't also just say, well, I'm going to hire a new salesperson.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you better have some systems on how you're going to pay them and motivate them and track their business and look at the KPIs and all those types of things. You better have some habits of checking in and what they say and how they close business, their intake process. You have to do all kinds of other things. So what I found is at least if you can change a couple. So I'll give you an example. So let's take systems. So I was on the Camino de Santiago. All right. So the Camino de Santiago is a series of trails that all end in Santiago de Compostela, Spain. Right. And there is a cathedral there that houses the relics of St. James. So it's a pilgrimage for people to start somewhere on the path and to journey to the cathedral. And so I start in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, right? It's on the other side of the Pyrenees from Spain. And it's going to be about a 500-mile hike for me. So it's going to take me about a month. And so I start hiking. And after I pass through Pamplona, Spain, where they do the running of the bulls and all that kind of stuff, right? I had trained for this hike. I had hiked, in my hiking boots. I'd hiked with a backpack on. I figured out how to pack my backpack and carry the weight and all this type of stuff, but it just didn't feel right. I was getting tired during the day. Nothing was comfortable. I wasn't moving as quickly as I wanted to be. And so I stop in this little village on the west side of Pamplona. And I go to the center of this little village and I dump out everything from my pack and my pockets onto the sidewalk. And I divided everything into 2 piles. There was a pile of what I called my essentials. I have to have this, right? I had to have my shoes. I had to have a pair of socks. And my phone. And there were things that I didn't need. right? So there's a book, there was a notebook I had, there was, an extra pair of, a third pair of socks. I'm like, I don't need that. There were just things I didn't need. So I divide them into 2 piles. I put all the things I didn't need into a box and mailed them home, right? So I go into this post office and I just mail all these things. Now, these are things, by the way, I thought I needed. I carried them all the way to Spain. I had researched, I had practiced with them. I thought I needed them.
Yeah.
Turns out I didn't. So with the rest of the time, another, let's say probably 400 miles, without any of that stuff, didn't need any of it except for this one thing. So I get to this place on the trail another weekend and set my pack aside. And I reach into my pack and I pull out a rock, and that's this rock about the size of a plum, kind of bigger than a golf ball, but not as big as and I've got this rock in my backpack. Now, why was the rock in my essentials? Why was the rock something I would carry? Because I was at a place called the Cruz de Ferro, right? So it's called the Iron Cross. And it's, I don't know, probably a 30-foot to 40-foot tall cross sitting on top of a pile of stones. And all the stones are about the size of the one I have. And I go up to this pile of stones and I toss this stone onto the pile. And so what it represents is bringing your burdens, all right? So this is a rock I'd brought from home, right? And the idea is that we carry burdens with us. And sometimes we carry them from home, right? And at some point, we have to release these burdens at the base of the cross. And I wasn't significantly lighter physically from doing that, right?
Yeah.
It didn't weigh much. But mentally and emotionally, I became lighter. And what it taught me was that if I'm looking at systems, for example, maybe I don't need a new system in my business to make a plateau jump. Maybe I need fewer.
Yeah.
Maybe I need less things. And so when I got back to my business, I threw out a lot of systems. There was things I was tracking I didn't need to track. I was tracking probably a dozen things in my business. And I said, there's got to be one thing that really matters. And I'm going to start tracking that. And that's going to be my wildly important goal. And I'm going to be maniacal about tracking this one thing that drives everything else. And for us, it happened to be meetings with clients. Right? So if I can improve meetings with clients, if I can have more meetings with clients, my business will do better. My clients will do better.
Yeah.
And so I started tracking this singular thing. I still track these other, some other things, but I thought, here, this is one thing I need to focus on. I refined some of my other systems on our product development and our investment strategy. And even in my office, got rid of file cabinets, got rid of a trash can. No trash can, no trash. No file cabinets, no files. Got rid of a desk and had a table. No drawers, no distractions, because all I needed to do in that room was meet with clients and have discussion. I didn't need anything but that. And so I started looking at how do I refine how I approach things based on that. So there's an example of looking at that lever of change systems and how do you make a change. So I'll give you another example. You take goals, for example. So you remember meeting Jeremy Pointsnow?
Yes.
All right. So we played golf with Jeremy a couple of years ago. So Jeremy is a world championship golfer. He's also blind, right? So he competes against other blind golfers, but at an elite level. He's a world champion at it. And so we're hitting golf balls. And I don't know if I told you that story. So we're hitting, and what you've got to do with Jeremy is you've got to point him. He kind of squares up to the ball, and you have to say a little bit to the right, a little bit to the left, and kind of position the angle that he's supposed to be hitting the ball. And then you tell him how far, right? So all right, Jeremy, you're going to hit it 185 yards, whatever. And so I'm doing that for him. I said, all right, looks like, it's 185 yards, and we kind of angled a little bit to the right, not so much, back a little bit, all right, you're good. And then I said something. I said, now it's the first flag, not the second one on the left. Right. The second one on the left is at the other fairway. And, I didn't want him to do what I would do, which is to hit it into the other fairway. So I'm saying, hey, it's the flag you're going for is the first one, not the second one. And he stops and he gets out of his stance. And he says, Shawn, if I could see the second flag, I wouldn't need you to tell me where the first one was.
Yeah.
Right. And he said, all I need you to tell me is what the goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me about where the sand pits are. Don't tell me about the water on the left. Don't tell me about the tree I need to avoid. Just tell me what I need to do. I thought that's beautiful. So when we look at goals, they have to be the same way. They have to be so specific that we can't focus on the other things, that they're the goals, the vision in essence, has to be bigger than our fears.
Yeah. So bigger than your fears in the context of a goal. What is a goal that is not bigger than your fears?
So if you said, a better way to think about it is what are the things that would stop you from reaching your goal? All right. So I'm worried about compliance, which is a fair thing to do. But if it stops you from moving forward, you don't figure out ways around it. A lot of times those fears stop you from doing something rather than becoming your solution. So there's an example of there's a guy who was growing bananas, Zimmerman, or I can't remember the guy's name, but he owned a bunch of land in Brazil, and he was growing bananas, and he needed to get his bananas from one side of his land to the other side of the land. But his competition, the other banana grower, lobbied the council in that area to prevent a bridge from being built across his river.
Okay.
Right. Just to jack with
mess with him.
Just to mess with him. Right. And so he says, okay, so he built a pier on one side of the river, and then goes to the other side and he builds a pier on the other side of the river. And then he builds a dock that he attaches to the first pier that could be moved. And it was a floating dock. So he would float this dock out, attach it between the other two piers, and it became a bridge. And then he would undo it at the end of the day. And they raised Holy Hill. They said, oh, that's a bridge. He goes, no, it's just two docks and two piers and a dock. Right. Right. So if you stop, and he could have very easily said, oh, well, I guess I'm screwed.
I guess I'll never win.
Right?
Bridge law. Yeah.
All right. So I'll give you another example. Same guy. Right. So it was in Brazil. So it was unclear as to who, and I think the book is called The Fish That Ate the Whale, there was unclear who owned this plot of land. There's like 5,000 acres that would be perfect to grow bananas. But they weren't sure if this one guy owned it or the other guy owned it. So there was another company trying to buy the same land. And he thought, oh, this is going to be a legal mess. I mean, if we buy it from the first guy, the second guy is going to raise Holy Hell. I'm going to be tied up in legal, problems all my life. And so this company, the other company, is trying to do research and getting in the legal, trying to, search titles on who owns this land. And so what he does is he says, all right, and he goes to both guys. He says, I'm going to buy it from both of you. All right. So he's going to pay double.
He's going to pay double.
He's going to pay double. All right. So what was the goal?
To get the land.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. The goal wasn't to solve the problem of who owned the land.
Yeah.
Right. The goal was to own the land. So that was the goal. So anyway, there's just an example of having the goal be bigger than what your concerns are.
Okay. That's interesting. You used an example before about a runner who, maybe at first the runner wants to get faster times. Hey, I'm running a 15-minute mile. I want to get down to 13. Okay, I got there. Now I want to get down to 12. And then keep getting faster, running farther, running faster, running farther. And eventually, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Eventually, you're not going to be able to run any faster. You're not going to be able to run any farther. You're going to either reach the limit
Physical limit, yeah.
Your own physical limits, or you're going to age out of your ability to improve. Right.
Right.
You're probably not going to run faster at 80 than you were at 40. So you said, well, the goals may shift to, hey, I want to be able to run more days per week, or I want to be able to run pain-free, or I want to do, it doesn't have to be in the same theme as my past goals.
Right. In other words, I can't keep increasing my 100-yard dash time or 100-meter, dash time. Right. So maybe I've got to look at longer runs, maybe eventually longer walks, and then.
Yeah. And if we're clear on the aim is like, why am I running? Well, for most of us, we're not running to become Olympic champions. We're running for the health benefits, we're running for the mental benefits. I like being outside. It allows me an opportunity to clear my mind. Whatever that, there's a higher aim than just getting better at running for the sake of getting better at running. So if we change the goals to reflect that aim, instead of reflect like mindless linear progress in a certain avenue within the sport or within the business, then you actually have a better chance of aligning your future with that aim, when the original pathway of getting faster, running farther, making more money, whatever it is, isn't really achievable anymore.
Yeah. I mean, your goals will change. They've got to be realistic and achievable, specific. But when you look at goal changing as one of the levers of change, along with systems, which we talked about, habits, relationships, beliefs, being able to identify what are the goals or what are the levers of change I need to activate to reach this particular new plateau, this vision of what I want. And the visualization of that next plateau, we're not talking about goals right now. Goals are the mechanisms and the steps to advance you towards the vision. So now we're talking about vision.
The goal. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're talking about the vision. So when you look at visioning what that next plateau is, it's really interesting. There was you've heard about the marshmallow test that was done in the 1970s with psychologist Michener. Yeah. So the test was, right, they put this marshmallow in front of these little kids, elementary school kids, and they said, hey, if you can wait until I come back, I'll give you not only that you can eat that marshmallow, but I'll give you a second marshmallow. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And they didn't tell the kids how long they were going to be gone. They would just leave, and then they would observe the kid and see what they did to occupy themselves. And some kids just sit and stared at it. Some covered their eyes. Some went and played with toys to, distract themselves. And what they found was that kids who had better internal control of that, did better in life later, achieved more, yada, yada. Okay, so this is pretty well documented. It's also, I think, legally required that any business book you write has to have this example in it. Right? So,
okay.
All right, it's pretty well documented. Yeah. All right, so what's less well documented is the follow-up to that. Here's what they did. Okay, so the original experiment, don't eat this marshmallow until I get back and you could have the second marshmallow. So then what they did is they placed the second marshmallow in front of the kid too. Here's marshmallow 1 that I want you to wait on. Here's your reward right there. The real second marshmallow right there on the table. Okay. As you might expect, things got worse. Okay. Right? The kids had less self-control. They succumbed to it because they
just eat both.
They just ate both, or they ate the one and then they felt, but it wasn't as easy for the kids. Okay. That's what we would expect. Right? I mean, you would expect that.
Okay.
So then they did something interesting. They replaced that second marshmallow on the table, the reward marshmallow, with a picture of a marshmallow. Okay, it was just a picture of the second marshmallow, not the real one. The rewards still were worse.
Huh.
Okay, so what their brain was telling them was that what I'm visualizing, this image that clearly isn't real, this image is real. Their brain was acting as if what they saw was real.
Okay.
So when we look at visualization, know that our body thinks that's real.
Mhm.
So if you can visualize what you're wanting to do, what you want that next plateau to be, it will be real if
Yeah.
you do it the right way, right? So what I encourage people to do when you look at visualization, think about visualization in, right, you're staring at a wall, right? You want to get from this first level up to the top, up to the second level. All right, so you got to go up this wall. On this wall are 3 levels. First level, second level, third level. The first level is what I'll call the point of acceptance. And that is what would be acceptable or the ante to play at this next level, right? So you want to take your business from where it is now to this elite level.
Yes.
You want to, in other words, you want to work, let's say, with only billionaires, whatever, right? Or you want to work only with movie stars, whatever you're going to do, something at this new level. There is something that is expected at that level that you're not doing now that they would think, obviously, you have to do there, right? Whatever that is. The second level, a point of distinction. What's going to make your business different within this competition at the new level? What are you going to do that's a little bit different, a little bit distinctive at this new level? And then third, point of remarkability. What is so extraordinary that people would talk about it, right? So let me give you an example. So we went, if you remember, we went on this trip to Boston years ago, right? And we stayed near the Boston Commons, the park right in the middle of downtown Boston. We stayed at the Four Seasons. And so we pull up to the Four Seasons, and what do I expect from the Four Seasons? Now, Four Seasons is a top-tier hotel, right?
Yes.
Right.
You expect the rooms to be nice. You expect the service to be great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Clean rooms, nice rooms, good location, friendly staff. Sure. I expect all of that. And I don't even expect that if I go to like a
La Quinta or something,
a motel, right?
Yeah.
All right, I go to a motel or a Best Western or something. I'm like, okay, whatever. This room's not great. The service isn't great. It's not a great location. Okay, but at this top tier, I expect it. That's the point of acceptance. Okay. So then I go up to the front desk, and the front desk person says to me, "Welcome back, Mr. Smith."
Wow, what?
Yeah. Okay.
Like you've been there every.
I've not met her, right? And it had been a couple of years since I had stayed in that hotel. Okay. So what she did was the valet radioed her when I was coming in. He asked my name. Get your name because you can write it down on a little card. As soon as I turned my back, he radioed to her and said, "Mr. Smith is coming in." She looks up. Mr. Smith, because I had a reservation, saw that I had stayed there before and prepared her greeting, which was, "Welcome back, Mr. Smith." Yeah, that made me feel pretty special. Okay. So, point of distinction. Most other hotels aren't going to do that. We get to the room. We've got 2 rooms. We got a room for kids, a room for the adults. We go to the adult room. It's everything I expect. It's nice. It's a great view. It's clean, whole bit. And we go next door to the room the kids are. It's the same room, right? Just in reverse. It's nice. It's clean. Great view. But on the table in the middle of the room were 3 teddy bears, 3 little bags of cookies, and some soda. Now, they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't have to. But I told people about it, right?
Yeah.
So it's this point of remarkability. I'll give you another example. So I just bought a Tesla a few months ago, right? Now, that is a luxury car, let's say. All right, so what do we expect at a luxury car? Just at the point of acceptance, what would you think?
Nice leather seats.
Sure. Good styling.
Yeah, good styling on the exterior.
Got to drive nice.
Well.
Sure, right, that's what I expect. Now, if I'm buying a low-end car, I don't expect maybe any of that. I could have cloth seats. It doesn't have to drive great. It just has got to get me from point A to point B. All right. But I expect nice styling, good drive, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Point of acceptance, point of distinction. I bought the whole car on my app, on my phone. The whole interaction was an app.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's kind of interesting. That's a point of I don't know any other car. I can't do that with a BMW.
Yeah.
Buy it on the app. I put in what I wanted, designed it, transferred the money, did my trade in, scheduled the time to go pick it up, all on the app. Never talked to a person. Okay. Interesting. All right. Point of remarkability. What would be something about the Tesla that I would tell people about? What do you think?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, it drives itself.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. So that's kind of cool. All right. So they did something interesting. All right. Now this is stupid, but think about how excited they were when they thought about doing this in the design meeting. Right. I can pick a seat in my car. I can pick a passenger seat on the driver's side, and I can push a button and it'll make it sound like they farted.
Okay.
All right. Now that's stupid.
Yeah.
Right. You know any other cars that do that? All right. Do you now that's 12-year-old humor, right?
Yes.
But it's also funny to 45-year-olds. It's
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's funny to everybody. But that is a point of remarkability. People talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll guarantee every Tesla owner has shown people that.
Yeah.
It's a point of remarkability. It drives itself. It's a point of remarkability. I can make it do a show. I can park it in front of my house and it will dance and light up, play music, and do a show for me. Right?
Yeah.
Now, they didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right? They spent money and time doing that, but there's a point of remarkability. So when you visualize that next plateau, you go through these phases. Now, what people think is, I'm going to run out of ideas by the time I get to point of remarkability. Right? And they spend all their time on point of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a little bit of time on point of distinction. Point of remarkability is where your energy drives. It's where the best ideas actually reside. You get your energy there. So you got to get up to the point of remarkability when you're thinking about that next plateau, because that's where your energy, that's where your excitement, that's where the alignment with your intrinsic motivation comes from.
What is your top tip, decision-making tip for business owners?
So when you look at this, all right, I'm going to say it this way. There is the top tip would be to visualize what you want your next plateau to be, that point of visualization. Put that through an acid test. So the acid test is, can I and will I afford to do what it takes to get there? Right. So because that buried in that question, can I and will I do what it costs to get there? Can I afford to do what it's going to cost to get there? I've got to know what it's going to take. Right. So I've got to quantify the goal to be able to know what it's going to take to reach this next plateau. I've got to be able to look at, can I do this? Do I have the capabilities to do this? Am I motivated to do it? Do I understand the rewards to do it? So I've got to be able to make that goal a reality, and I've got to have the right mindsets before I begin to jump. Those mindsets are having a spirit of gratitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to look back at what I've done and be able to have a sense of gratitude. I'll give you an example. So I used to go to my aunt and uncle's house for Christmas. So the family would, we put all the Christmas gifts in, we'd drive over to Dallas, we'd go there. And in their house was this bathroom in the front of the house. It was an old 1940s house. And they'd renovated it, but they'd left this one bathroom sort of unrenovated. And on the door jamb, they had these little pin marks, and they would draw a line where how tall everybody was. And they just put the date, right? You've seen this, all right? So you could look and say, oh, this person was this tall 3 years ago, and now they're this tall, and you would see that. All right. So we would get very excited to go measure ourselves and put new marks on the wall. All right. So what wasn't on the wall was where we should be next year. Right? What wasn't on the wall is the nationalized chart of heights and where we are in percentiles.
Yeah.
Right. We weren't comparing ourselves to anybody else other than what we had done. Now, why is that important? I would start meetings this way at my business and say, what are you grateful for? The reason is that when you experience gratitude, your blood pressure actually, your dopamine increases, which is the striving goal. You'll actually be in a better position to move forward to a next plateau if you start with gratitude. The next is satisfaction. When you look at, you've heard that song, I Can't Get No Satisfaction, the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
Right. If you listen to all the other words, you see why, right? Because there is a covetousness around that. When you look at satisfaction or think about contentment, I'm content with what I have. I am thankful for what I have. But that's different from being resentful.
Yeah.
Right. Right. So if I'm content, on the opposite end of that scale comes resentment. Think about anybody you know that's full of resentment, and they're probably not killing it.
Yeah.
Right. So there comes a time when you look at gratitude, you look at being content or satisfied with where you are. That doesn't mean complacency, right? Because again, we're built for growth, we're built for striving, but being also satisfied with what you have. The third is happiness, right? So have a spirit of happiness. When you look at the Declaration of Independence, all right, so we talks about life, liberty, and what?
Pursuit of happiness.
Pursuit of happiness. All right. So what's interesting is, why did Jefferson put this qualifier of pursuit of in front of happiness? He didn't say the pursuit of life, but pursuit of liberty, pursuit of happiness. So why is that? Because we're built for the pursuit. We're built for the next thing, for growth, development. But it depends on how you're defining happiness.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the hedonic treadmill of just satisfying the proclivities of the present, in other words, I want this now, this is what I want now, you're never going to get off that, right? It's always more, you'll never be satisfied. If you're looking for eudaimonic happiness, right, which is a striving for personal fulfillment or blessedness, right? So it sounds like EU, which in Greek means good. We talked about stress before, and I said eustress is good stress. U is EU stress, good stress. Eudaimonic is good happiness, or good. It was good. It actually means good spirit.
Okay.
Right. So if we're striving for that, then we are striving for something that we're visualizing, that next plateau that is bringing you to a point of more fulfillment. It's aligning with your intrinsic motivation. It is aligning with your true values, and you've got to know what those are. I'll tell you one last story and we'll wrap. When you look at the visualization, we say we start with a point of gratitude, being satisfied with where you are, point of happiness, have that next plateau aligned with your intrinsic motivation and aligned with your values.
Mm-hmm.
The values, you have to be accessible to those. You have to understand what those values are, and they have to be accessible. And there's a client I was working with years ago, and they had down near Austin, they had a show cave, right? Which is just they had been granted this land by their grandfather or great grandfather. On the land they found back in the 60s, they found this cave. And so they turned it into a tourist attraction. You can go down in this cave and, see what it is. All right. And that's all it was, just a hole in the ground. And they got a few people to pay a few bucks to go see this cave. Well, what they started doing is they said, all right, we're going to do a gift shop. Right. And then business went up a little more. And then they added a little mini golf, and they added a zip line, and like a little panning for gold, other little attraction, right? And every year it got a little better, but not significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then one year they added this extra thing, and business took off. Like, it was a massive jump in business. And what they added, interestingly enough, was a parking lot. And it was just up front. And what they realized was that what people wanted was what was below the surface, what they couldn't see, right? Just like when we talk about what we want from somebody, we want to know what their values are. We can't see them, right? You have to make them accessible. So by adding a parking lot, what they realized is people were coming in, not finding a place to park, and just leaving.
Yeah.
Right. Once they made what was below the surface accessible, a lot more people were willing to come and explore.
Wow.
Yeah. Kind of interesting.
Where can people get a copy of Plateau Jumping?
It's available on Amazon. Just put in Plateau Jumping book, like right there, and you can buy it right on there.
Cool.
Yeah, it just came out this month, so it's brand new.
Get a copy. We will link it on our website and in our show notes. Thanks again.
Hey, thanks.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Shawn Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.